We now know that often it's the most robust people who experience mental health problems because they're used to putting on a positive face, being the strong person, and over time that can become wearing. In this episode, dating, mental health, and wellness.
So dating is all about self-esteem. And as we know, dates, you can have good dates and bad dates. But what happens when you've had a lot of bad dates? It can really affect you emotionally, and you may not want to go out dating again. How do we keep our mental health in a good way, and how do we remain upbeat about dating?
Oh, this is a loaded one. So you're absolutely right. Mental health is key within dating. It's key within life outside of the dating world. And it is important that we look after and take care of ourselves. I think some people don't even want to enter into a relationship because they've maybe been in a bad relationship in the past and they're worried about it happening again. But if you are out there and you are dating, how do you make sure that you keep your self-esteem intact? Because, of course, you can go into dating very positive and ebullient and you're going to get this person that you're looking for. And after a few failed dates or failing to attract anyone with your profile, you can end up feeling a bit dejected. And sometimes the answer is to take a break away from dating. Sometimes the answer is to make sure that you have lots of other things going on in your life. So if you are dating, I often say dating is a full-time job, but you should be doing other things at the same time. You should still be meeting your friends, still going to the gym if you do that, going for walks, reading books, watching television, whatever it is that keeps you centered and keeps you feeling positive about yourself and boosting your self-esteem, you should keep doing. As you said at the beginning, if you are dating and it's maybe not going well, you've had a few bad dates or a short-term relationship that you were really excited about and ended up not going in the direction you were hoping for, it can bash you, it can dent you. And one of the important things to do is to recognize that, because as a matchmaker, one of the things that we find is quite often people are not ready. There's a lack of readiness, because if you are hurt, if you are feeling damaged and fragile, I can introduce you to the best person in the world for you, and you're going to find fault, or you're going to wrap yourself in that protective coating that we've talked about before, and you're going to end up rejecting that person out of fear of being hurt.
So where does therapy come into this? I mean, would you advocate somebody talking to a counsellor, a therapist, a psychotherapist? I mean, there are lots of different levels of people that you can talk to. And do you think that's part of, we're much more in tune now with our emotional well-being. Do you think that actually talking with a therapist can help prepare you for dating or help you get through difficult situations?
Well, we know that 1 in 4 people in the UK will experience a mental health problem every year. We know that moves up to about 50% of people over the course of a lifetime. So it affects all of us. There was a time when mental health and mental health problems had a stigma attached to them. It was very much like epilepsy had a stigma attached to it. It was seen to be a fault, a problem. And of course, we now know that's not the case. We now know that often it's the most robust people who experience mental health problems because they're used to putting on a positive face, being the strong person, and over time that can become wearing. When it comes to picking a therapist or going to a therapist, it's certainly in the dating world, it's become, and I should say, with the younger generation, it's become far more acceptable. And even recently, Tinder and Hinge, 2 online dating companies, they came out with stats to say, Hinge in particular came out and said 91% of people that were currently registered with them when they did this survey, if you can believe this stat, said they would prefer if the person that they were dating had been to see a therapist, not just once, but ongoing therapy. There's a bit of a movement around, it's a small movement, but I've noticed it around, is it a red flag if your partner hasn't been to therapy. So there is very much a sense of wanting to be with someone who has taken the time to work through their emotions, to work through their issues, faults, problems, whatever you want to call them, to make sure they're getting into a relationship with the best possible footing. I don't know about that stat from Hinge at 91%. I think that seems quite a high number. And I do wonder how they asked the question, how they posed the question to get that result. But it does tell you that daters today are taking mental health very seriously. Certainly in the past, if a woman in particular, I'm going to be a little bit sexist here, had heard that the chap had been to therapy, she'd run for the hills. I have to say, men have never found the topic of conversation of going to therapists good either. So to be fair, both men and, in fact, what's interesting is from a matchmaker's perspective, both men and women have both said in the past they would run for the hills if someone that they were dating or about to date talked about therapy or their therapist. And it could be because the therapist can sometimes become the third wheel in a relationship. And of course, what my therapist says, and the person that you're dating, if that's what they're saying to you, you don't have any input in that. You can't say, well, I disagree with your therapist, or I would never have said that. I can't believe your therapist said that, because they're not in the room. And so that's a tricky one. But when it comes to therapy and mental health, I'm all for doing everything you can to support your mental health. I don't think that therapists and the concept of therapists is particularly sexy. I don't think it's something you should lead with. And we've talked about this before. What do you disclose in a first, second, or third date? I don't think that talking about a therapist is something that you should be bringing up, in the same way that I don't think, the fact that you might have arthritis or the fact that you might have an issue with your bladder. I don't think that these are appropriate topics for the first few dates. Sure, bring it up later. But the point of a therapist is, they used to say, therapists for people who don't have enough friends. I don't think that's true, but I think people's attention spans are quite short, and therapists can be really helpful to get people through a certain period of time, whether it's postnatal depression, the death of a parent, whether it's dealing with other issues related to your mental health. I think having someone who can focus their time and attention and listen to you can really help in getting people over a hurdle. So I am definitely a positive proponent of therapy, not necessarily the never-ending type where you're week in, week out for the next 10 years. But if you do have a problem or you do have an issue, seeking help, getting the help you need is vital, important, maybe a bit unsexy, but it doesn't matter. You don't have to tell anyone. But if you do need help, please do get it. And in fact, I will make sure that wherever this appears, we've got some links at the bottom for mental health and resources that you can go to in order to learn a little bit more about someone who might be able to help you.
I think also there's a very sort of British stoicism about dealing with things for yourself. I think the Americans are much better at, I think in general, most people will have seen a therapist or have, or even, have a regular therapist. I was thinking about The Sopranos. Do you remember The Sopranos TV show? I think he ends up sleeping with his therapist, doesn't he? Or is it just in his dream? But he certainly fantasizes about her.
Yeah. So The Sopranos. So you're right. And what was really dysfunctional, and this is not how normal therapy works. What was really dysfunctional was she began to feel that enmeshment as well. And I remember that she was assaulted, she was attacked, and she went through this difficulty of trying to decide whether to tell him, because she knew his feelings for her, and she also knew that it would be the end of that chap if she was to tell him. So they had quite a complex relationship. And one of the things with having a therapist who, I have had a therapist. We're going to open up and say I have had a therapist. I had severe postnatal depression, and I do say I could never have got through it without my therapist, because I was mentally unwell. I was ill, and I was thinking the kinds of thoughts that, with the benefit of time and therapy and hindsight, are completely crazy. I know you're not meant to say crazy in the same sentence as mental health, but I'm allowed to say it about myself. And my thoughts were unhinged. And it comes as a surprise sometimes to people when I tell them I went through that, because, I've got maybe a strong personality, and I've got, good opinions, and I'm quite a robust person. But when it comes to mental health, it's a chemical imbalance. There's something going on that means that you're not in the real world. And having that therapist for that period of time, it hasn't kept on going, but having someone for that period really was crucial in getting me through that period of time. And I'm all the better for it. I'm all the healthier for it. I'm a better mother for it.
So can therapy help you love somebody?
Gosh, that's a good one. Therapy, I mean, it's not a catch-all, and it could be that you would attend a therapist and they're not right for you. That's the other thing. Not every therapist is going to be the right therapist for you. You've got to find the person that's going to support you. So you might have to go to a few therapists before you find the right connection. Can it help you love someone? It's not going to help you love someone who is totally unsuitable for you and not the right person. It's not designed to do that. But it can if you have some attachment issues, if you are really, really fearful they're going to break my heart when the person's saying, no, I want to be with you, I want to get married, I want to live together, I want to have kids. And you're thinking, no, they're going to leave me. So it can help with any blocks that you might have about relationships, about, what is it, if they use the word relationship, what does it mean to you? Oh, it means divorce, imprisoned, captured, hidden away. And they go, okay, we can work through this so that some of the adjectives that you are using about a partner and about a relationship, we can shift, we can make it a bit different. So therapists can certainly help you with your perspective on someone else, just by stopping you from carrying on with behaviors that are potentially prevent you carrying on with behaviors that are potentially disruptive to that relationship. But it can't make you love someone who you just don't see in those terms.
But maybe, having a bit like a marriage guidance counselor, really, but you're talking to them on your own, maybe talking to somebody who is uninvolved. And as we know, talking to friends and family, the lines get blurred because they're emotionally involved with you. But talking to somebody who is not involved can sometimes help you, and then asking you the right question can sometimes perhaps help you understand your feelings and work out, whether it, none of us know what love is, or what, yes, it's butterflies, or it may not be butterflies for one person, but it's trying to understand how you feel, isn't it? And that's quite difficult. And I think actually having help with that by an independent arbitrator, I'm not sure that's the right word, but I think could be enormously helpful if you're serious about somebody and you want to talk to somebody independent. Is that a therapist?
My strong sense and feeling is that if you are dating someone and you have something that is so totally unanswered, are they treating me the way that I would like to be treated? Why are their behaviors like this? Why does this happen between us? And I'm talking about dating rather than being in a marriage. My strong sense is that that is not a person that you should be with. If you're asking fundamental questions about the way that they're behaving, the way that they're treating you, things that are going on, I don't think that's a good relationship or healthy relationship to be in. And sometimes by having, as you exactly said, a third party, a kind of not disinterested party, they're interested in your well-being, but they're not interested in, and they're not invested in whether you're in a relationship or out of a relationship. They're invested in helping you in your mental health. Having that person, talking to them, explaining what's going on and what's happening, can give a perspective you might not have seen before, heard before, realized before. And so it can be really valuable. But if you're fundamentally questioning as a dater the relationship that you're in, and that relationship is not bringing you some degree of happiness and joy, and again, it's like a job. Not every day is going to be brilliant, fun, adventurous. Some days are going to be humdrum and boring. It's exactly the same when you're dating someone. Not every day is going to be exciting. And actually, that's probably another episode. Sometimes the relationships that are not the exciting ones are the ones that you should be in. So we'll leave that for another day. But I completely agree with you that having a conversation and clarifying some things for you can be extremely useful, extremely valuable to allow you to move on and to move ahead.
And what about okay, you're committed to another person, maybe you're engaged. What do you think about having relationship counseling before you get married or before you move in together? Do you think, is that something that you would suggest, that you think is a good idea, can be helpful?
Absolutely. I am all for it. I think it is crucial to have support and help before you get married. If you are Catholic, there's marriage preparation courses. If you're Protestant, there's Alpha course. I am certain that there will be other courses for other faiths. It is really important. And of course, the reason that different faiths have this support, whether it's from an imam, priest, reverend, they have this support because they are really invested in marriages working. And there are certain things that you can do in the marriage preparation course. Again, it's kind of moving away from therapy and more about questioning who you are, who they are, and whether this is right. And it's not usually done by a therapist. It's usually done by a religious or spiritual leader. These spiritual leaders want success from the marriage. And so what they do is they make the couple think through tough scenarios, question what they really want, so that at the end of it, the couple knows more about one another than when they started, probably more about themselves than when they started, and it allows them to make that decision that they're moving forward with marriage on the right footing, knowing that all the tough stuff has been dealt with. And I think a lot of these religious leaders, they know that sometimes people, see someone they fancy, get the hots for them, want to get married, think that their whole life is going to be incredible and wonderful, and they're going to have this, beautiful dress, expensive wedding, all their mates are going to be there, there's going to be plenty of drinking or not. And the focus can sometimes not be on the marriage and more on the day. It's not just so if you have a faith, it's lean on that. Absolutely use your faith-based resources. Do the course. In some faiths, it's compulsory to have done this course, and so it should be. If you don't have that, if you're not a person of faith, if you're not spiritual, there are other services out there where you can go to spend this time and make sure that you are going into marriage with the best, with the most open of heart. As they say, go in with your eyes wide open and then keep them half shut. And eyes wide open, very much part of doing these courses in preparation.
Yeah. And it's not it can be, it's a nice thing to do. It's a good thing to do. It's not something that you should be scared of. And they will perhaps ask the questions or touch on the things that you don't necessarily want to ask, about maybe potentially having children or just kind of or how you're going to divide, whether one's working or are you going to have a joint bank account? Sometimes those things are questions that are slightly awkward, or you might have an assumption that about, well, of course we're going to have a joint bank account, whereas your other half is kind of, and actually it's quite interesting, the questions that you will be asked that you may not have thought of. And it's, I just think it's important. It's, you wouldn't buy a car without looking at all the everything that you're going to get with it. And it's the same with you're buying into a relationship, aren't you, really? Particularly buying a house together.
Yeah, and we're using financial language here, and I would use financial language and say it's an investment in your partner to do this. And this is not about. I can see potentially some conflict where one party doesn't want to do it and one does, and sure, as you say, you might think it's nerve wracking. You might be fearful of what you might be asked. You might be worried about the direction it would go in, but it is an investment in your partner and it's an investment in your relationship. And any relationship at all that is going to succeed, what do we know? You've got to have strong communication. You've got to have alignment on finances. The interesting one, you've also got to, one of the variables that they say is quite often key in the success of a relationship is alcohol. I don't think we've talked about this one before, but alcohol is considered to be one of the most key variables in all of this. Money, religion, the rest of it, out the door. Alcohol. Because if you have one partner who loves to go out night after night, entertaining, drinking, bottle or two of wine, and the other one would prefer to have a glass at holidays and summertime, that is not going to work. And so arguments over amounts of alcohol, being drunk, how often you're going out, because of course it's hand in hand, isn't it? Because if you're drinking a lot, you're probably entertaining a lot, you're going out a lot, you're socializing a lot. And if someone would much rather have a cozier on the sofa with a can of Pepsi Max, do people do that? Can of Pepsi Max and some popcorn?
Of my friends who I know where one drinks and one doesn't, it works really well because first of all, you've always got a sober driver. And more often than not, it's not about not wanting to go out. It's the fact that they are very happy to go out. They just don't like the taste of alcohol, or they haven't have an issue with it, so they're not drinking. And it's let's face it, and a lot more people are drinking less, and all those kind of non-alcoholic. Well, we won't get into sort of whether you drink or not, but you can look like you're drinking and you're not drinking. But I agree. Yeah, it's very important. Can I just say, well, I mean, it's nice to go out and have fun, but it's also occasionally nice to sit on the sofa with a glass of wine together.
Sitting on the sofa with a glass of wine is great fun. I couldn't agree more. Not that we want to promote alcohol consumption. We've got to be a little bit careful here, but absolutely right. That's exactly what being part of a couple is. It's having that comfort level to either stay in and watch a film and have a lovely evening, or head out. And certainly for those of us who partied quite hard when they were younger, the idea of going out clubbing or being out till 4 a.m, I can't imagine anything worse. I do want to be in. I do want to be inside. I don't want to be out partying. But I have the excuse, I used up my mileage at a very young age. And I certainly hope that my daughter does not follow in my stead. But I liked what you said there. I like, well, when it comes to partying, I liked what you said there when you talked about I'd said, the alcohol and differing levels can cause issues. And you'd said, well, yes, your experience and the experience of your friends is providing you both know what those differing levels are, providing you're both agreed to those differing levels, there's not an issue. It's not going to be resentment building up that you're once again, carrying a sloppy drunk home. And I like that take on it, which is providing both couples know what they're going in for, providing both couples have agreed what the limits are in terms of the drinking, whether one does and one doesn't. There's no drink pushing, which is really, really important. Then it can work. I like that, Carole.
Sorry, I'm trying to think of my. I had it in my head and it's gone. Oh, shit bags.
That's okay. I'm adding my little markers.
Yes. So, okay. So, Gillian, what happens if you like you go on a date, you like them very much, but they have done a lot of therapy and they are leading with it and telling you about it. I had a friend who had an issue with her partner because he occasionally would talk about himself in the third person.
Eek.
Yeah. So, okay, we know a lot of us have had a bit of therapy or counseling. Where do you think that's important to mention on the first date, or, because it can be too much, can't it?
Wait,
Not to lead with it.
absolutely not. You are not leading with therapy. Therapy is back of the queue. Therapy is something that you can mention later on if it comes up in conversation. No one should, unless you're both therapy obsessed, therapy is not something that should be coming up.
Therapist, maybe.
Well, yes, that's definitely a podcast episode entirely on its own. I have a whole other series of theories about psychotherapists, which is they're all bunkers. So that's a whole other thing.
In a good way.
Absolutely bonkers in the best possible way. So I would say therapy, when you are going on a first date, it's still the advert. It doesn't mean you have to be perfect, because none of us are, although sometimes we try and fail. But you have to give an impression of yourself that is the positive stuff going on in their life. This is a stranger. They don't know anything about you. They are not invested in you. Why should they be? You have just met. If you meet a stranger for the first time and they're talking about their health ailments, their predicaments, whether it's a dodgy ankle, a broken rib, or a nervous health, a nervous breakdown a year ago, all of these things to the other person, they're thinking, oh gosh, that's awful, that's sad, that's terrible, poor person. You don't want the person you're on a date with to be thinking these thoughts. You don't want them thinking, oh, how awful, how dreadful, what a shame, what a terrible thing. You want the person sitting opposite to think, oh, they're engaging, they're interesting, they're funny, they're good company. The thought, you've got to think to yourself, what do you want the person opposite you to be thinking about you? Now, for a younger generation, they might think, oh no, I've got to bring up a therapist, because they will think this is wonderful. They've worked on their mental health. They've worked on their emotional well-being. They're in a good place to date. Sure, they might be thinking that, but as an overall balance, it's not sexy. It's not fun. It's not interesting. Leave that for later. If it comes up, hey, have you ever seen a therapist? Or my sister's a therapist. My brother's a therapist. If it comes up naturally in conversation, oh yeah, great, therapy's wonderful. But it's not the sexiest of topics, no matter what some of the online dating companies are trying to tell you at this point. It is to be taken seriously. It is a serious thing, but there's no point saying, let me tell you about my surgeon. He did a great job on my cruciate ligament. I mean, oh, I'm so pleased. Give me number. So it's not attractive to the other side to hear about your health complaints. Sorry.
I think that's quite funny, to come away from a date feeling sorry for somebody. That's quite interesting, because in a way you would there's part of me that thinks it may be quite endearing, but you're right, you have got to be very careful. You don't want to lead with your, unless it's done in a kind of very funny way. You're absolutely right. It's going right back to what you always say, when after a date, do you want to see that person or not? And if you're coming away feeling sorry for them, that's not a great head start, is it?
It's not a great head start. And as a matchmaker, I'm dealing with real people in real situations. And I have had that feedback where people have come away and the more engaging a person, the more warm you are, the more capable you are of connecting, the higher the empathy scale, the more likely people are going to feel so comfortable in your presence that they start to kind of unravel all of this information, all of this kind of their background, their history, the times that they were blighted, when they got fired, when this happened as a kid. And so the warmer and more empathetic you are, the more likely that is to happen. What you have to make a decision at that point is this something, all you've got is the person they've presented to you. And if all they have is a shopping list of issues and problems, it's extremely unlikely you're going to want to see them again. And if you compare it to, for instance, a job interview, when you turn up to the job interview, you don't say, oh, I'm habitually late and you're never going to get me here before 10 if you start at 9. I am terrible at answering emails. I have zero respect for my current boss, so I imagine I'll transfer that to you. That's not how it works. We all know, this is the thing, we all know what to do in an interview. We all pretty much, even at universities are teaching it, colleges are teaching it, schools are teaching it. We practice and practice and practice for interviews for job. We know when they say, tell us your weak point, which I understand they still ask in some interviews, you don't actually give them a weak point. You say, oh, I have a tendency to overwork and sometimes I have to rein it in a little bit. And this is what we're talking about. It doesn't mean that when you are selected for the role, you have to kind of maintain this sheeny, glossy person for the next 10 years. Some people do, but it's the same with a first date. I keep saying best foot forward. I've got to stop saying that one, but it's best foot forward for both of you. So do make an effort. Do turn up and think of some interesting things you might want to cover. And, maybe we all need to practice a bit more when it comes to dating, because we're practicing to get a job. And you could argue that the person you go home to at the end of the night is maybe even more important than the colleagues that you spend your day with. So a bit more time spent on it and less of the sense of, but I want them to know who I am. Well, yeah, do that after they have decided to invest in you, not up front.
So companies are adding self-care badges, wellness badges, mindfulness badges onto dating apps. If you are, would you suggest that if you're writing your profile, would you say I'm in touch with my emotional well-being? Or, I mean, would you naturally mention anything about your emotional health, wellness, that kind of thing? Or do you not think that it has a place?
If your health and wellness journey is the focal point of who you are, so whether you're a circus performer or a yoga teacher, or you are a shaman, or you just spend your life in that world. So you maybe have a normal job, 9 to 5, but the rest of the time, your whole life is about crystals, healing, mindfulness, whatever one of those or a combination of those. Absolutely. Put it on your profile, have a picture of you wearing whatever shamanic outfit you might sometimes wear, because this is important to you and who you are. If you are the demographic that goes to Burning Man, that's going to be pretty clear and pretty obvious on your dating profile. If you are someone who is pretty mainstream in terms of their habits, what they're doing, what they're up to, putting in the fact that you are seeing a therapist is not relevant. Mindfulness, everyone loves mindfulness. No one really thinks something about it. It's about saying, I like swimming, I like reading, I'm into mindfulness. That's great.
It's a catch-all, isn't it?
It's a catch-all, and no one's really got, and you could maybe talk about when you meet up that you went on a very interesting Buddhist retreat. That sounds quite interesting, and you can compare it and contrast it to your time in Tenerife or Lanzarote. So that the point is, as long as you're able to view it in a kind of in a whole world way, rather than my whole identity is the fact that I see there. So what you don't want is my whole identity is the fact that I see a therapist once a week, or my whole identity is the fact that I do mindfulness, unless of course you're a Buddhist practitioner in mindfulness, in which case that's great. But what people want is they want balance. So if you are a yoga instructor, brilliant, talk away about yoga and then talk about the other things that you love and care for, your dog, whatever else is important in your life. What people don't want is for someone's life to be out of kilter out of balance because they're going to think, well, then my relationship with them would be out of balance because there is no hinterland. There is nothing more beyond, what Anne said to me in our last session. That's not attractive. That's not sexy, and it's unlikely to lead anywhere.
So, Gillian, is it important to go through a self-development journey before you embark on dating?
It's important in dating that you're ready, but readiness doesn't mean that you are a whole, healed person, because none of us are. None of us are.
And that's really important. If you're going to wait until you're perfect, the perfect emotional state, the perfect weight, the perfect this, forget it.
Forget about it. Forget about it. So wherever you are in that journey, whether you're someone who's decided, yeah, I've had enough of that, I don't want to do it again, or I'm just not interested in doing it, especially if you're British and listening to this, the whole concept of therapy and therapists can be terrifying and awful, even though, perhaps you might need it. But when it comes to readiness and dating, you've got to go for it. The only readiness that I care about is, have you got over the last person you were dating? If you haven't, that's okay, provided you don't repeat the patterns from the past and find yourself in the same space. So when people come to me at Drawing Down the Moon, the most important thing is, are you ready? It's the number one reason we would ever turn someone down. That readiness is your mental health 100% perfect? Because as we know, most people at some point in the year, or a quarter of people at some point in the year, will have an issue. But are you someone who's dealing with those issues? Whether it's by spending time with friends, spending time doing hobbies you love, at least allowing yourself to heal. But the most important readiness is, have you got over the last person in your life, the last love of your life, whether you've been widowed, divorced, or dating someone that just wasn't right for you? Have you dealt with those feelings? Have you worked it through either on your own or with other people? That's the readiness, because it is one of those old cliches of, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. It's exactly right. I do not want to introduce you to someone who should be the person that you're with, but because you are simply not there, your mindset is not there, you're hung up on the last person, you're not able to get into a relationship. So you don't have to be seeing a therapist or dealing with any of these things in the way that we've talked about in order to be ready for a relationship. And don't wait. Don't keep saying, as you said, when I'm thinner, when I'm wealthier, when I've got less on at work, when I am mentally 100% ready and robust, unless, of course, you're extremely fragile. And if you're extremely fragile, take the time, work on yourself, and then get into dating. Because you have to be a bit robust with dating. You have to go into it pretty strong, the best profile you can, the best description you've got, the best photographs, and you have to know there's going to be rejection and know you're resilient to that. That's the way it works. Every person that is not right for you is a stepping stone towards the person that is right for you. And if you just get dejected because that's 5 people who weren't interested, 8 people, 9 people, 10 people, instead of thinking this is the way it's going to keep going, you think, oh, this is fantastic. I've got through all of these unsuitable people. I'm ready for the right one for me.
But you must still be going out and having fun and getting out there, but just not looking for a relationship.
Life is never going to be put on hold. If you feel that you are not robust enough to date, don't date. Get some help with that. If you're working on being robust enough to get out there and date, by all means, you've got to keep socializing. One of the most important things, as we know, for our mental health is to keep those connections with people. And they've even shown now simple things. Paying a stranger a compliment, it boosts so much. It boosts your health and it boosts their health. What's so important is to keep going out there. Try not to get too much into a hole. If you're going out, if you're meeting people, you're being kind to strangers, you're attending barbecues, dinners, events, good things are going to happen.
Very, very good.
Which one, Carole?
A running club or a I don't know, a book club or just getting out there and not, that there are things you can do. Get out there.
The House Harriers. Have I said that right? It's a bit of a tongue twister. Are you a member of them, Carole? Have you ever gone out running with them?
I'm not a runner. I just look so many people that say, park run and all those things are just so brilliant, and it's a lovely group of people, and
and like I said to my daughter, I dropped my daughter off at a camp this morning. I'm going to pick her up later today, and I said to her, none of the other children know one another either. You're all strangers, but the point is, none of you know one another. There's no pre-existing relationship, but everyone wants to meet someone. Everyone wants to connect. So you've got as much a chance as anyone else of making a friend by the time I pick you up today. And that's the advice I would like to leave with our listeners as well. We're all strangers. You've got as much a chance as anyone else of finding the right person for you. So just keep going.
Here. I love that. How old is she? 4?
She's 4.
She's 4, and we're all, even when you're 84, it's the same thing. It's the same thing.
Right. And getting the benefit of my wisdom 24 hours a day, whether she likes it or not.
She's a lucky girl. Yeah. Thanks so much. Lovely to talk to you again.
And to you, Carole. Thank you so much. Looking forward to talking soon.